Hope. Wow. Okay. Quick. Oh, wait. We're waiting for this to go live. Quick firearms related question. Okay, listen. Okay. My testosterone has never been higher. Seeing this sick shotgun. But what do you actually shoot these things at? Because shooting these at the range is boring because like 2 shots destroys an entire target. Do you actually shoot like Trapper Skeet with a semi-auto shotgun, or is that just weird? Or what else do you normally do with these? Like, what do you do for fun with these types of weapons? Immigrants? What PCC you getting? I don't know. I got too many recommendations and I got overwhelmed and now I don't know. And the ones I looked at looked cringe. But they were all the good ones I was getting recommended, so I'm not sure. Justice Barrett might actually have a shred of integrity. I'm honestly so surprised at her rulings. Her writings have been generally good. I'm surprised. But maybe I shouldn't be, because I think Pisco said this over and over again, that Roberts is the center of the court. And I don't know if it was just reading his opinion on the immunity thing and then reading Gorsuch's writing on Loper. It just made me respect Gorsuch so much more. And it made me hate Roberts. But the Supreme Court of the United States, Department of State et al. Versus AIDS Vaccine Advocacy Coalition et al. So this is the court case where multiple organizations are suing the Department of State, that's the State Department, due to the freezing of the USAID funds, I believe. So the reason why the State Department is also called out here is because U.S. aid, by congressional statute, that department reports to the officer who is in charge of the State Department, which is Marco Rubio. So that's this case. That was the big one that we were following. We had a TRO issued. The government said, and then the judge said, hey, this is the TRO. And the government said, and then the judge said, seriously, follow the TRO. And then the government said, hold on. The Supreme Court's going to save me. And then in the final hour, the Supreme Court said, we will consider saving you. And then the government and these companies got to submit briefs to the Supreme Court, which I think is incredibly rare. I think this is incredibly weird that they're basically asking the Supreme Court. That we're on exceptional levels of weird judicial shit, I think, right? A TRO is already exceptional. The court has decided you're probably going to win your case, and we're going to step in and we're going to preemptively take action against a party that this case is against, right? TRO is already weird. An appeal for a TRO, I don't even know if that's ordinarily possible. Like in an ordinary civil or criminal court, I don't know if you're allowed to, like, can you get a TRO in criminal court? I don't even know if you can appeal a TRO ordinarily, because these things are usually on a very short-term basis. You get a temporary restraining order, and then you might have like a couple weeks until you get your preliminary injunction hearing, which is where both sides have the opportunity to present some evidence to argue for whether or not the court can take preemptive measures against a defendant in a case. But so we've appealed the TRO. We've begged the Supreme Court, please save us. The government has said, the Trump administration said. So on application to vacate the order issued by the United States District Court for the District of Columbia. Your district court is your first level federal court. District of Columbia is the district that it's in. And then the application was by the federal government. It was a beg to vacate the order, so to dismiss the order that the D.C. court issued, which was the temporary restraining order. Okay, that's where we're at. On February 13th, the United States District Court for the District of Columbia entered a temporary restraining order enjoining, meaning to stop. I don't know why that word sounds like it does the opposite of what it means. But the District of Columbia entered a temporary restraining order enjoining the government from enforcing directives pausing disbursements of foreign development assistance funds. The present application does not challenge the government's obligation to follow that order. The present application does not challenge the government's obligation to follow that order. I don't know what that means when he says that. The present application, so the application to vacate the order, does not challenge the government's obligation. Okay. On February 25th, the district court ordered the government to issue payments for a portion of the paused disbursements. Oh, okay. That's what the TRO is about. Okay. Okay. To issue payments for a portion of the paused disbursements, those owed for work already completed before the issuance of the district court's temporary restraining order by 11:59 p.m. on February 26th. Several hours before that deadline, the government filed this application to vacate or dismiss the district court's February 25th order and requested an immediate administrative stay. A stay is where you say, stay, stop that action for a second, just chill, stay. The Chief Justice, Justice Roberts, entered an administrative stay shortly before the 11:59 p.m. deadline and subsequently referred the application to the court. So Roberts granted a temporary administrative stay, okay, for the court to hear this request. The application is denied. Given that the deadline in the challenged order has now passed, and in light of the ongoing preliminary injunction proceedings, the district court should clarify what obligations the government must fulfill to ensure compliance with the temporary restraining order with due regard for the feasibility of any compliance timelines. Oof. So this is rough because the government and that judge has made it clear over and over again, this is what you need to do. You should have done it by now. You know exactly what you need to do. And all of the challenges that you're giving to this for saying, oh no, we shouldn't have to do this are bullshit. They're all bullshit. All the challenges that the government gave were bullshit. The order heretofore entered by the Chief Justice is vacated. I wonder if Trump knew this was coming. Alito and Thomas, who are the two rogue justices right now in the Supreme Court, these are the two people who will go when what's his face? Oh fuck, I forget the names now. Eastman. When Eastman was talking to Rosen about whether or not the Trump admin could overturn the election, and Eastman was like, we'd probably lose 7-2, if I'm being honest. That 2, I bet, it was Alito and Thomas, because these guys are fucking crazy. Although eventually he said we'd probably lose 9-0. But Justice Alito, with whom Justice Thomas, Justice Gorsuch, and Justice Kavanaugh join, dissenting from the denial of the application to vacate order. That's really scary. So this was a 5-4 decision, okay? Now, I said that my best girl, Amy Coney Barrett, she would be the swing vote, I feel, on a reasonably split court. I am shocked. Keep in mind, I just don't know much about these justices, though. Other more legally informed people will know more. I've only read so many decisions, right? I'm shocked that Roberts actually had a fucking spine, okay? Now, one thing that's been said over and over again, I don't know how true this is, okay, but that I've heard from the more cynical people are, we do have a defense in our courts against Donald Trump and against the encroaching executive power, and that's Roberts, because if there's one thing Roberts loves more than giving the president power, it's stealing power from the other two branches for the courts. Now, maybe this is that prophecy fulfilled, that Roberts has said, hey, you know what? Trump, if you want to be a dictator, that's fine, but you're not going to be a dictator by stealing power from us, okay? You got to go to the legislature and steal power from them. Fuck you, all right? Have you read this? No, I have not read this yet, so I don't know what the dissent or the concurrence or anything. I don't know what any of these looks like yet, so we'll see. Does a single district court judge... Oh, ew, oh, God, sorry, fuck, oh, God, I read like 5 words ahead. Okay, we're reading the dissent. Wait. Is there like a court's opinion offered? Or is the whole writing just Alito's schizo posting? Okay, we're just going to read the schizophrenic ramblings of Alito. Okay. All right. Usually the majority opinion is written first. We get nothing? Seriously? I don't even know how normal that is, but all right. All right. Does a single district court judge who likely lacks jurisdiction have the unchecked power to compel the government of the United States to pay out, and probably lose forever, $2 billion taxpayer dollars? The answer to that question should be an emphatic no, but a majority of this court apparently thinks otherwise. I am stunned. So to be clear, lacks jurisdiction. It's a federal court hearing a federal issue. So I don't know what the fuck he means by this, unless he thinks that every single challenge to the government should automatically go to the Supreme Court, which sounds fucking retarded. But it's Alito, and he is fucking retarded, so who knows? I have no idea what, but I'm sure he'll get into it. I'm sure he's going to. I'm sure he'll get into this somewhere. I think the concept is original jurisdiction is the jurisdiction that something has to originate in, like. Original jurisdiction refers to a court's authority to hear and decide a case for the first time before any appellate review occurs, before an appeal happens. The Supreme Court has original jurisdiction in very, very, very few circumstances. One has to do, I believe, with court cases between states, and I believe court cases between the state and the federal government. I think. I don't even know if between the state and the federal government. I don't even know if the Supreme Court has original jurisdiction there. But I don't know why it would have... I don't know why it would have original jurisdiction here. Keep in mind that the Supreme Court is supposed to be. Remember, when you're going to court, you can do fact determining things and you can do law determining things, right? When you go to court, when you go to trial. That trial is a determination on the facts, right? A jury or sometimes a judge will hear the plaintiff and the defense present their cases, and then they'll make a determination on the facts of who's right or wrong. The Supreme Court doesn't usually deal in fact. They deal in law and legal interpretation. Now, there might be extraordinary cases where the Supreme Court has original jurisdiction, so they get to do these like fact determining things. I've never read a case like that in my life. I think it happens. It's just very, very, very rare. But anyways, okay, let's here. In capsule form, this is what happened. Respondents are a group of American businesses and nonprofits that receive foreign assistance funds from the State Department and the U.S. Agency for International Development. They brought suit and claimed that the current administration's temporary pause of foreign assistance payments is unlawful. On February 13th, 2025, the district court issued a temporary restraining order requiring the government to halt its funding pause. It based that decision on a finding that respondents are likely to succeed in showing that the government violated the Administrative Procedure Act. After issuing the TRO, the district judge grew frustrated with the pace at which funds were being dispersed. And on February 25th, he issued a second order requiring the government to pay out approximately $2 billion. So Alito says grew frustrated with the pace at which the funds were being dispersed. My understanding is nothing had been dispersed. And not only had nothing been dispersed, but when the federal government went to this judge twice, they weren't even able to show that they dispersed anything. That was one of the reasons why the judge was irritated. I believe the quote was, he asked, can you update me on the progress? And the government said, we're not prepared to discuss that at this time. And I think the judge said something like, you knew you were coming here to talk about this. What do you mean you're not prepared to discuss this at this time? It's like, what? The judge brushed aside the government's argument that sovereign immunity barred this enforcement order. I don't know anything about sovereign immunity, so I can't speak to whether this is a stupid statement or not. And he took two steps that, unless corrected, would prevent any higher court from reviewing and possibly stopping the payments. First, he labeled the order as a non-appealable TRO, and second, he demanded that the money be paid within 36 hours. This left the government little time to try to obtain some review of what it regarded as a lawless order. Now, I would be shocked, I don't have the legal background, but I would be shocked if you generally can appeal TROs and that TROs are probably supposed to be enforced immediately. Remember, the whole point of a temporary restraining order is the court is saying, you're probably going to lose this case, and if you carry on with your current action, you're going to harm the plaintiffs in a way that they can never be made whole again. If that's the case, that a TRO has been issued, why would you want a whole bunch of appeals and a huge delay in them stopping the TRO enforcement, right? The whole point of a TRO is that you have to stop now or you're going to fuck these people up forever, right? You can't be made whole again. So that seems pretty ordinary that a TRO would want to be enforced almost immediately, as soon as possible, and that you would want to... And that you can't have appeal after appeal. I wonder if you can ordinarily appeal. Can you appeal a TRO? This is a random law blog. The general rule is that such orders standing alone are generally not appealable. Although this, we're talking about like a federal government case or whatever. Judges' decisions on whether or not to issue a TRO may not be appealed. Yeah, okay, that just seems ordinary to me. That makes sense, though, if you think about what a TRO is. This left the government little time to try to obtain some review of what it regarded as a lawless order. The government moved for a stay pending appeal in the district court, but the judge shrugged off the government's sovereign immunity argument and ignored the government's representation that most of the money in question, once dispersed, could probably not be recovered. See appendix or whatever to application, blah, blah, blah. The government quickly filed an appeal in the United States Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia. I like how he says quickly filed an appeal. Aren't we like 12 days past the issuance of the first TRO? He points to the 25th, but like, wasn't that, February 13th is when the TRO was initially issued. I like how we're quickly filed an appeal. We're arguing about this TRO like 3 weeks later. What is quick about this? What? But with only 4 hours to spare before the payment deadline, 4 hours! What the fuck? The DC court dismissed the government's appeal because it took the district court's TRO label at face value and determined it lacked appellate jurisdiction. With nowhere else to turn and the deadline fast approaching, the government asked this court to intervene. At the last moment, the Chief Justice issued an administrative stay. Unfortunately, a majority has now undone that stay. As a result, the government must apparently pay the $2 billion post haste, not because the law requires it, but simply because a district judge so ordered. Well, apparently the APA does require it, but okay. As the nation's highest court, we have a duty to ensure that the power entrusted to federal judges by the Constitution is not abused. Today, the court fails to carry out that responsibility. I want to read this real quick. Hold on. Sovereign immunity is a common law doctrine that bars all lawsuits against the government. However, the government may consent to suit or waive its immunity. For example, the federal government has waived its sovereign immunity for numerous causes of action, including the Federal Tort Claims Act, which waives the federal government's sovereign immunity for tort suits. Isn't this a tort suit? Would it not be? They're suing for disbursement of funds that they've already been promised, basically. And the Tucker Act, which waives the federal government's sovereign immunity for several claims that's based on contractual obligations and uncompensated takings of property. Okay. Most state legislatures have waived sovereign immunity for tort claims against the state and local governments. Majority of states have capped the dollar amount of tort damage. Okay. So even if this didn't count as tort, I mean, these are contractual obligations, right? This is money that the federal government already promised, no? I wonder where sovereign immunity, if that even, I don't know if that even applies here. I don't know. Well, I guess the judge didn't think so. Time does not allow a lengthy discussion of the legal issues presented by this case, but a brief summary suffices to show that the district court's order should be vacated or, at the very least, stayed. To start, it is clear that the district court's enforcement order should be construed as an appealable preliminary injunction, not a mere TRO. A TRO, as its name suggests, is temporary, and its proper role is to restrain challenged conduct for a short time while the court considers whether more lasting relief is warranted. The order here, which commanded the payment of a vast sum, really, is it a vast sum compared to the federal government's budget? Is that true? That in all likelihood can never be fully recovered is in no sense temporary. Nor did the order merely restrain the government's challenged action in order to preserve the status quo. Rather, it acts as a mandatory injunction requiring affirmative action by the government. Is it really affirmative action if we're saying that you have to continue to pay out as you normally have? I don't know about this one. I don't know what the case law or I'm not going to look these cases up. I don't trust anything Alito says anyway. You probably just... And given its likely irreversibility, the district court's enforcement order effectively gave respondents a portion of the ultimate relief they seek. I mean, in a way, isn't that definitionally kind of what a TRO is? For these reasons, the Court of Appeals had jurisdiction to consider the government's appeal, and we have jurisdiction to review and summarily vacate that court's erroneous judgment. Even if the majority is unwilling to vacate the district court's order, it should at least stay the district court's enforcement order until the government is able to petition for a writ of certiorari. And for a writ of certiorari, this is so the Supreme Court can hear the case. For what? For the TRO or for the entire case? In considering whether to issue such a stay, we ask at a minimum, 1, whether the moving party is likely to prevail on the merits, and 2, whether that moving party is likely to suffer irreparable harm. In close cases, to the extent that likelihood of certiorari is a relevant factor, blah, 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 concurring, it is met here. Recent years have seen a sharp increase in district court orders enjoining important government initiatives, and some of these have been labeled as unappealable TROs. Clarification of the standards for distinguishing between a TRO and a preliminary injunction is a matter that deserves this court's attention at the present time. The same is true regarding the scope of the APA's waiver of sovereign immunity. Oh, the APA literally is a waiver of sovereign immunity. What? Administrative Procedures Act. I wonder how... Fuck, I don't know where it would even be in here. Destiny Live. Oh, are we getting a... Oh, shit. Okay, we'll come back to this in a bit.
They didn't stand in favor of cutting taxes for hardworking Americans. Hello, everybody. Hello. How are we? I apologize for my tardiness. It's quite the newsy day, and I was with the president talking about that news, so I look forward to taking your questions on it. But first, I want to talk about President Trump's historic and incredible speech last night. The American people and the entire world watched President Trump powerfully lay out how he's renewing the American dream in a record-breaking joint address to Congress, and Americans loved what they heard. According to a CBS YouGov survey, an overwhelming 76% of those watching approved of President Trump's speech last night. The president spoke about how he's taken more than 400 executive actions on his key promises. The expectations were high, and President Trump is exceeding them. According to brand new polling from the Daily Mail, President Trump has never been more popular as his approval ratings are reaching historic highs. More Americans believe America is headed in the right direction than the wrong direction. Everyday Americans love this president because he tells it like it is, no matter what, and he did that last night. President Trump level set with the American people on the economy and exposed how badly Joe Biden screwed it up by causing the worst inflation crisis in 4 decades. President Trump was honest about where we are while making clear that help is on the way. As the president declared last night, he will make America affordable again. Last night, you also saw who motivates the president to work so hard. Everyday Americans, who President Trump shined a spotlight on last night in his speech. From Mark Fogel, who President Trump was finally able to reunite with his family and his beautiful 95-year-old mother after being detained in Russia, to Peyton McNabb, whose heart-wrenching story motivated President Trump to end men in women's sports, and to Allison and Lauren Phillips, the mother and sister of Laken Riley, who President Trump honored by signing the Laken Riley Act to ensure her name will live on forever.
Forever.
In other amazing and surprise moments, President Trump honored the life of Jocelyn Nungare, who was brutally murdered by illegal alien gang members. He ensured Jocelyn will never be forgotten by renaming a national wildlife refuge in her home state of Texas to honor her life. And in one of the greatest surprise moments of the night, DJ Daniel, an incredible 13-year-old boy who was beating brain cancer, saw his dreams fulfilled by President Trump when he was made an honorary Secret Service agent. And finally, after nearly 4 years, President Trump delivered justice for the families of the 13 American heroes who were killed at Abbey Gate in the Biden-botched Afghanistan withdrawal, which was one of the worst humiliations in the history of our country. President Trump announced that we have detained Mohammed Sharifullah, the monster who was responsible for that horrific attack, and he was delivered to Dulles Airfield earlier this morning. On his first day in office, President Trump's national security team across the federal government prioritized intelligence gathering to locate this evil individual. President Trump's team shared intelligence with regional partners such as Pakistan, who helped identify this monster in the borderland area late last month. Mohammed confessed to his crimes related to Abbey Gate and other attacks in Russia and Iran as well to the Pakistanis. And U.S. law enforcement officers traveled to Pakistan over the weekend, where he again confessed his crimes to the FBI. As President Trump said last night, this killer will now face the swift sword of American justice for these atrocities right here on United States soil. Joe Biden was responsible for this botched withdrawal, and he had 3 years to find this evil terrorist, and he didn't even try to get the job done.
Wow.
But President Trump campaigned on behalf of and grew very close to the Gold Star families. He promised them accountability, and last night, he kept his promise. He spoke to those Gold Star families yesterday, ahead of his speech, in an incredibly heartwarming call to share this incredible news. And as President Trump asked in his speech last night, how could anyone possibly be opposed to any of this action that he is taking? Well, apparently, the modern-day Democrat Party could. The behavior of Democrats last night was completely disgraceful and demonstrated how severely out of touch they are with the American public. It was the most shameful moment in the history of presidential addresses in that beautiful chamber. In what was supposed to be a unifying moment for our country, Democrat members of Congress instead screamed at the President of the United States, who was just overwhelmingly reelected by their constituents, walked out of the chamber, and worst of all, they disrespected the American people. Democrats didn't stand to keep men out of women's sports. They couldn't even clap for a girl who got her head smashed in by a man on a volleyball court. Democrats didn't stand for an innocent and beautiful child who is surviving brain cancer. They opposed eliminating taxes on tips and Social Security. They didn't stand in favor of cutting taxes for hardworking Americans. They couldn't even clap for 2 mothers whose daughters were killed by illegal aliens. One of the only things that could get Democrats off their feet last night was cheering for Ukraine, not for America. Last night was a very clarifying moment for our country. Democrats exposed themselves as the party of insanity and hate, the party that wants to put America last. They've allowed their Trump derangement syndrome to stop them from celebrating America and our people, and we will not allow them to forget that. And it's not just the Democrat Party. The mainstream media still doesn't get it. Last night, MSNBC's Nicole Wallace disgustingly looped in a 13-year-old boy with brain cancer into an attack on the president over January 6th. And CNN's first chyron out of the speech called it divisive. President Trump wasn't divisive. The Democrats were. And CNN was proven wrong by their own viewers, 69% of whom, in a post-speech poll, said they had a positive reaction to the president's speech. It's sad and frankly pathetic that Democrats and liberals in the legacy media continue to allow their hatred for the president to override their love for our country. But nevertheless, the president will continue to unify this nation through policies that are grounded in common sense and that uplift all Americans. We have an individual in our new media seat today, Mary Margaret Olahan, who is the Daily Wire's first ever White House correspondent. Congratulations, Mary Margaret. The Daily Wire was founded 10 years ago by Ben Shapiro. The Daily Wire now has over 1 million paid subscribers.
Finally, some real media in here. The Daily Wire, yes.
They are now the 5th largest podcast network in the world and home to some of the top-ranked shows. With that, I will take your questions, and Mary Margaret, why don't you kick us off?
Thank you so much, Caroline. Great to be here.
Thanks.
So I have 2 questions, if that's okay. The
Sure.
first on last night, the second on Maine. You talked about behavior from Democrat lawmakers, a lot of disruptions, and I just wanted to kind of go back to that. We saw Democrat lawmakers not stand for Lincoln Riley, for Peyton McNabb, for the son of a slain police officer and 13-year-old cancer survivor. What are the optics of that nationally, just in terms of not just the people who were in the room last night, but across the nation? And also, was President Trump expecting this type of behavior when he was crafting his speech?
So I gave a quote to one
When
of the
he was
outlets yesterday that
crafting
Democrats
his
treating, like, children would be the
speech.
least surprising thing of the night. And unfortunately, that quote did turn out to be true. I think the president and everyone, frankly, was surprised by the Democrats refusing to stand for not the president's policies, because frankly we expected that, but for the everyday Americans who President Trump was shining a light on their stories. Mark Fogel, for instance, an American school teacher who was detained by the Russians, President Trump freed him. If Joe Biden had done that, they all would have been on their feet, but because of it came from President Trump, they weren't. So we think it's very sad, but we're very proud of the president today, and the American people are the people that this president cares about most, and the reviews are in, and everybody loved his speech.
Thank you. And then on Maine, we know that the governor of Maine has really pushed back against the president's executive order saying that boys should not be girls' sports. I spoke with a lawmaker from Maine this morning who told me she'd been censured by state lawmakers for calling a man and speaking up on this. What is the next move in the White House in this battle to protect the integrity of women's sports?
Wow.
Well, the Department of Education
Second
has
question.
taken
Man, we're
ongoing
max
litigation.
glazing
The
here.
president has made a
Okay.
commitment to ensure that states are being held accountable if they continue to allow men and women's sports, which he believes is an egregious violation of taxpayer dollars. And so that fight continues, and the president won't back down. Again, this is a common sense policy. 80% of the American people, including more than 60% of Democrats, do not want men and women's sports. So the president will stand by this commitment. Thank you. Gabe, good to see you in here.
Good to see you, Caroline. A couple questions. One, can you confirm that the president held talks with the big 3 automakers today, speaking about potentially delaying tariffs?
I can confirm, and I'm glad that you asked, because the president sent me out here with a statement directly from him on this. I saw it was reported earlier today by Bloomberg News, and he wanted me to share this with all of you. We spoke with the big 3 auto dealers. We are going to give a 1-month exemption on any autos coming through USMCA. Reciprocal tariffs will still go into effect on April 2nd, but at the request of the companies associated with USMCA, the president is giving them an exemption for 1 month so they are not at an economic disadvantage. So the 3 companies that he spoke to are Stellantis, Ford, and General Motors. They requested the call, they made the ask, and the president is happy to do it. It's a 1-month exemption.
And the president
1
has
month,
spoken on social media
nice.
that He's spoken with Prime Minister Trudeau. He says he's not satisfied with what the Prime Minister has said when it comes to fentanyl, but less than 1%, as you know, less than 1% of the fentanyl seized last year was in the northern border. What else does Canada need to do?
Well, the president did just put out a statement on his call with the governor, Justin Trudeau, as he calls him, of Canada, and he said that he was not pleased, as you said. He said it's not good enough. He told Prime Minister Justin Trudeau that directly. The call ended in a somewhat friendly manner, as the president said, but he's not going to stop standing up for the American people. And to answer your question directly when it comes to fentanyl, for the last 4 years, unfortunately, our neighbors to the north and the south, Canada and Mexico, respectively, have allowed America to be a dumping ground, not just for illegal aliens, but for illegal, poisonous, deadly fentanyl, which is now the #1 killer of young people in this country aged 18 to 34. Through the northern border in Canada, in last fiscal year alone, there was enough fentanyl seized to kill 4.2 1.8 billion people, and that number is
Wow.
up 2,000
Billions of
50% from
Americans are gonna be
2023 the year before.
dying.
So there's been
Oh,
more
no.
than a 2,000% increase in illegal fentanyl seizure at the northern border. Why? Because Canada is allowing that fentanyl to come to the United States. The president sees these numbers. He thinks about the lives that are lost, and
Thanks,
everybody
Canada.
in this room, I'm sure everybody watching at home, everybody across the country knows someone in our lives who has been killed at the hands of this deadly poison. There needs to be repercussions for that. The president feels very strongly
But
about
Caroline,
it.
respectfully, it's just 43 pounds that were found last year. That's less than a carry-on suitcase. He's got a lot of fentanyl compared to, say, Mexico. The vast majority of the fentanyl is brought in through Mexico, not Canada. So what else does Canada need to do?
Well, I just told you, last year alone, there was a 2,000% increase in
Well,
illegal
I just told you. Doesn't respond to your question. Let me tell you something, liberal. Doesn't tell you anything.
fentanyl. You're asking me for what the president's justification is for these tariffs. It's not up to you. You're not the president, Gabe. And
He
frankly,
didn't ask for the justification. He asked you what he needs to do, what Canada needs to do to get these tariffs rescinded. That's what he asked, but
I think it's a little bit disrespectful to the families in this country who have lost loved ones at the hands of this deadly poison. If you talk to them, and this president has, they are
oh, more propaganda. Yes, King. Yes, propaganda me. Yes.
grateful that they finally have a president who is standing up to both Canada and Mexico, and most importantly, to China as well. The president added an additional 10% tariff on China because this deadly poison is being produced in that country. It's being distributed through our neighbors, and there needs to be consequences for that, period. Peter.
Thank you, Caroline. If the U.S. has a longstanding policy that we do not negotiate with terrorists, then why is the U.S. now negotiating directly and for the first time ever with Hamas?
Well, when it comes to the negotiations that you're referring to, first of all, the special envoy who's engaged in those negotiations does have the authority to talk to anyone. Israel was consulted on this matter. And look, dialogue and talking to people around the world to do what's in the best interest of the American people is something that the president has proven is what he believes is good faith effort to do what's right for the American people.
Is it just about the hostages, or are they also talking about the president's plan to take over Gaza?
These are ongoing talks and discussions. I'm not going to detail them here. There are American lives at stake. I would defer you to the Department of State for further details, but I'm not going to get into those talks here at this
And
podium.
we know that some officials here were miffed that Zelensky showed up last week without a suit for his meeting in the Oval Office. But Elon Musk never wears a suit.
He did last night.
So what is this question?
Oh.
Well, Elon Musk wore a suit last night. I'm sure you saw it.
Was he spooked by
It
Zelensky,
looked.
Zelensky getting kicked out?
No, I don't think so. I'm just pointing out that he did wear a suit last night. And
Next
I
question.
think the president liked that very much, and he looked great. Speaking of the president, he just passed me a note while I'm standing here. He wanted me to hold this up. This is the poll that I cited, the CBS YouGov poll that shows that 76% of those who watched the president's speech last night approved of
The
his speech.
pictures.
And so it goes to my earlier point that I made in my monologue about how incredibly sad it is that we have a modern-day Democrat Party who is so severely out of touch with the American public. This is a great poll. The ultimate poll, though, came on November 5th when the president won by an overwhelming margin that he spoke about last
Overwhelming.
night. Democrats weren't happy to hear that either. Ouija.
Thank you, Caroline. Back on tariffs, last night President Trump said there will be a little disturbance, but we're okay with that. Can you put a dollar figure amount on how much the average
Nope.
American family
No
should
answers here.
expect to pay as this disturbance? And why should Americans be okay with that when so many are already struggling to pay the bills?
Well, first of all, last night, the president told the truth. And he was realistic, and he level set with the American people. And I think, frankly, it's very refreshing, and everybody in this room should be very grateful that we have a president who tells the truth about the reality of the economic situation that we are in, unlike the previous president who lied to everybody's faces, saying inflation was transitory, saying it was under control, saying that the border was secure, when none of that was true.
Wow.
So the president is being frank and honest, and the American people
We're so
elected this
lucky.
president to have
Overwhelming
monumental
majority.
reform and change,
Mandate.
including rebuilding our manufacturing base in this country, standing up to foreign nations who have been ripping off our country for decades. And that requires a little bit of disruption. That requires a lot of effort and work that this president is focused on doing. With that said, as the president said last night, his administration is wholeheartedly committed, of course, to ending the inflation nightmare caused by the Biden administration.
Yes.
Look at the deregulation efforts. Look at the president's push last night in his speech for Congress to pass tax cuts, to end taxes on Social Security and overtime pay for hardworking Americans, end taxes on tips. We need Congress to
Why?
get that done because that's going to put more money back into the pockets of the American people. And I didn't even mention energy.
How's that gonna
Look
help
at
with our
the
deficits
president's,
again?
approach and focus on unleashing the might of our energy industry. We know that's the #1 driver of inflation. He's been slashing back a lot of the burdensome regulation from the previous administration to unleash our energy industry here at home, which will drive down costs. He said he is committed to making America affordable again. He did it in his first term, and Americans can trust him to do it again.
President Trump
Sure.
has made clear, Caroline, that he loves tariffs, but the stock market does not. How does he factor that into his decision-making?
Well, the president does love tariffs. He said it's one of his favorite words in the English dictionary, and he believes in tariffs because they'll ultimately make make America rich again. They're going to raise revenue. They're going to help us
make
pay
us
down our debt.
rich.
Most importantly, they're going to bring American jobs here back home. So I think for folks on Wall Street who may be concerned, look at what this president did for you in his first term. Wall Street boomed, stock market boomed. The president expects that to happen again, but most importantly, Main Street is going to boom, and that's why the president has this whole of government economic approach, which includes tax cuts, tariffs, regulation cuts, and an energy industry that will bring down costs for American consumers. Sure, Monica.
Thank you, Caroline. You mentioned not one Democrat senator voted to protect women's sports from males. Not one Democrat congressman or congresswoman stood to applaud or support protecting women's spaces and sports at the president's joint session to Congress last night, as you articulately mentioned in the beginning. So I'm wondering, what message is that sending to not only young women who are competing in these sports across the country,
what the fuck?
but also to the
What
parents
is it?
of
Ash
these young
Wednesday?
girls?
Yeah. I think the message that Americans should take away from last night is that they have a president in the Oval Office who is committed to doing what's right for them, especially women and girls across the country. And I think it's very ironic, thank you for bringing up the point about women, that Democrat women were wearing pink to support our fellow females, yet they couldn't stand, again, for a young woman who was almost killed and severely...
Okay, just as a heads up, take what I say with a grain of salt here. I think that entire thing was bullshit. The girl got spiked. It sucks. It happens in volleyball. It happens with cis athletes as well. But this girl that says that she had like fucking seizures or her was like facially paralyzed, I don't think any of that fucking happened. I couldn't find any good medical information on it. I couldn't find any proof of it. Everything she appeared in afterwards, her face seems fine. It seemed like a whole just like a whole dressed up story to make you think there was some like evil trans like spiker god that was just like annihilating female athletes in high school volleyball. I think that's fucking bullshit, but who knows? I could be wrong on that, but I couldn't find fuck all to support that actually happened the way that they said it did.
Injured by a man on the volleyball court. They couldn't stand for the mothers of two beautiful young women whose lives were taken tragically at the hands of illegal people. So you can't say you're the party of women and then support men and women's sports and not stand up for basic law and order and immigration reform that will protect women in this country. That's what President Trump is doing. He's the president for women. Lindsay, good to see you.
Thank you, Caroline. Good to see you. So, speaking of tariffs, China said yesterday that they're ready for any kind of war with the U.S. Because of these tariffs that have been placed on them. And a Chinese spokesperson also said that the tariffs would not lead to a resolution of U.S. concerns about fentanyl originating in China. Can you speak to how the administration is planning on responding to that?
Well, I think Secretary Hegseth has responded to that this morning. He said that America will always be prepared to defend itself, especially under the leadership of this president in the Oval Office. And that certainly remains true. Again, when it comes to tariffs, the president has been very tough on China, not just now with 20% and more with the reciprocal tariffs that will hit on April 2nd. But look at what he did in his first term. There were billions of dollars worth of tariffs that he implemented on China. And it's quite telling that the previous administration did not rescind those tariffs because they realized the value that they had in not only deterring China,
unilaterally
but also
rescind a
raising revenue
tariff.
here in the United States.
Got to negotiate for it. Pretty hard to do that unilaterally.
The president mentioned a little disturbance during his remarks yesterday. The CEO of Target says that consumers will likely see prices go up on everything from strawberries to bananas to avocados. How long should Americans expect to pay higher prices? Are we talking a week, a couple of days, a few months?
Again, I don't have a crystal ball, but what I can assure the American people is that this president and this administration is doing everything they can. And I would remind you and everybody else in this room that it's because of the previous administration's economic policies that Americans were left with record high inflation.
That
Inflation
has to not
throughout
work
Joe Biden's
eventually.
entire
That line
48
has
months in
to fail at
office
some
was
point.
at or
That you
above
can blame
3%.
the
It
prior
hit
administration
record highs,
so
as you know.
much.
And there's a whole list
I would
of
imagine.
what the Biden economic disaster this president was left to clean up. It's been a month, but he's working hard every single day to do just that.
One quick follow-up on the carve-out. Sorry to cut you off there. The U.S. imported $43 million worth of eggs from Canada. I know you mentioned some of the exemptions when it comes to automakers. Will there be any other carve-outs, including for eggs? We know prices are soaring for Americans.
The president is open to hearing about additional exemptions. He always has open dialogue, and he'll always do, what's right, what he believes is right for the American people. But again, as for the egg crisis in this country, the president is wholeheartedly committed to ensuring we're increasing our egg supply, and we're also bringing down cost. And Secretary Rollins has been all over this issue. She comes from an agricultural background and family. That's why she's leading that very important department. She wrote an amazing op-ed in the Wall Street Journal. She's been all over the media talking about her plan. She has a real plan. The president endorses it. And he even, gave her an off-the-prompter shout-out last night to say, Brooke, I'm counting on you. It's an important issue. And this White House is working with Secretary of Agriculture every single day to address this issue. Sure. Jordan.
Thanks, Caroline. So, what does it say that the Democrats, while they couldn't stand for Americans or stand for victims,
God,
they stood for war and clapped for war?
Wow, true.
Yeah,
I
the
love my
president,
daily propaganda
addressed
meetings.
That last night, I think, when he
Yes.
called out Senator Elizabeth Warren and said that, it, again, as I said in my opening speech, very telling that
Very
the
telling.
Democrats refused to clap for American people and American interests and American priorities, but they did clap for the country of Ukraine, which, by the way, the president's working very hard to end that war. So Democrats should be applauding him for actually doing something about it.
Follow up on that if I
Oh,
can.
thank God.
You've
Yes, please.
spoken recently about how
Evil
what
the
happened in
Democrats
Oval
are.
Office last week gave Americans an inside look into behind the scenes.
Oh, with
discussions
Doge.
with Zelensky. Is this how he treated Joe Biden and just treated him disrespectfully and received billions of dollars?
Well, it's a
Wow.
very interesting question. I don't know if anybody in here asked my predecessor who stood at this podium about that, but there was a report from NBC News that President Biden also got increasingly frustrated with President Zelensky when he was handing out blank checks, and President Zelensky kept asking for more. Joe Biden was quite
Blank
frustrated with
checks.
that. So again, as I've said repeatedly, Friday revealed the frustrations that this administration has had in closed-door negotiations with the Ukrainians. However, President Zelensky did put out a statement yesterday, which we believe is a positive step forward. And National Security Advisor Mike Waltz has been talking to his Ukrainian counterparts. And so we're in the midst of this, and we'll see what happens next. Caitlin.
Thanks, Caroline. I have two questions. One on the reprieve that is being granted to these three automakers for 1 month on the tariffs on Canada and Mexico. How did the president settle on 1 month?
The reciprocal tariffs will go into effect on April 2nd, and he feels strongly about that no matter what, no exemption, so that's where the 1 month comes
So
from.
does he expect them to be able to shift
She
production
misspoke.
within a month?
He told them that they should get on it, start investing, start moving, shift production here to the United States of America, where they will pay no tariff. That's the ultimate goal.
Wow.
And on the conversations between the White House and the Ukrainians and the letter that President Trump revealed last night that he got from President Zelensky, Director Ratcliffe said today that the president has paused also intelligence sharing with Ukraine. Is that temporary or is that permanent?
I believe what the National Security Council told me in regards to that was that they paused or they are reconsidering the funding for Ukraine, as you saw, the pause on the funding. As for intelligence matters, I would refer you to either the National Security Council or the CIA as
But
well.
they're considering lifting or reinstating the military aid going to Ukraine, which they paused. This
Again,
week.
it's a pause for a review.
Follow up on that.
Sure.
The president read parts of the letter that he received last night from President Zelensky. Can you give us a sense of when President Trump now plans to sign that minerals deal after receiving that letter?
Nope.
Those talks are happening as we speak. I just saw the National Security Advisor. He's working very hard on it. I believe he was going into the Oval Office to give the president an update on where this stands. But again, the president is committed to a peace deal. He wants to see this war end. And I think that President Zelensky's message, which he also shared on X as well, is a positive sign in the right direction.
The president also said that the United States was reclaiming the Panama Canal. The president of Panama this morning, or at some point today, said that President Trump was lying.
Uh-oh.
Wanted to get your response to that, and also curious if the president had a reason for not specifically mentioning BlackRock last night when he was praising the company that is buying canals or ports around the Panama.
Yeah, I'm not sure if Panama has seen what's going on with their own canal, but as you just mentioned, BlackRock is now interested in investing and taking over the two ends of the port, which is very important because the president was very vocal several weeks ago about the need to ensure that China is not controlling the Panama Canal. This is a very important place for the United States of America. We also saw that the Panama Canal lifted fees on our U.S. naval ships that are going in and out of the canal. That's a win for the United States of America, and the president will continue to ensure that the Chinese.
Hold on, I saw a bunch of you fucking retards saying this yesterday too. That oh no, the U.S. does own it because BlackRock bought it. Just because a foreign company buys something doesn't mean that's owned by another country. Okay, that is absolutely not true. So just because BlackRock or just because some American company buys infrastructure in another country doesn't mean that all of a sudden the other country owns it. That's not like a cheat code. It doesn't work that way. If a bunch of Chinese investors buy up a whole neighborhood in Miami, that doesn't mean that China all of a sudden owns part of Miami. That's not how that works. But.
Government, the CCP, cannot be infiltrated in the Western Hemisphere, and certainly not in the Panama Canal, which is a very important place for our country. Dasha.
The president continues to call the Prime Minister of Canada, Justin Trudeau, Governor of Canada. I'm curious what he means by that, and if there are any plans that are moving forward with trying to make Canada the 51st state? And I have a follow-up on the economy as well.
Sure. Well, the president put that in his True Social account, or his True Social post earlier today. He feels strongly that it would be very beneficial for the Canadian people to be the 51st state of the United States. They wouldn't be paying for these tariffs. They'd have much lower taxes if they were part of our great country.
Why are we saying this like with an air of seriousness? It's so fucking cringe.
So many voters
Oh,
decided
my government has
to
become
cast their ballots on,
cringe.
and they voted for President Trump. He has started to have that realistic conversation with the American people, that disturbance comment last night. But I'm curious if you can be real with Americans right now as all of these factors are playing out. Are things potentially going to get worse before they get better?
Look, I've now been asked and answered this same question just given to me in different verbiage of 3 different times, and I will answer it again in an effort of transparency to the American people, because this is an important issue, and the American people, this president understands that it is. And again, that's why in his joint address to Congress last night, he addressed this issue with a realistic and honest approach. He talked about what this administration is doing to unleash American energy and to make America affordable again, and this administration is wholeheartedly committed to doing it. And I would remind the American public that the first-term record of this president speaks volumes. That's why they reelected him, because they know that he can fix our broken economy, and it's very, very broken from the previous administration. Stephen.
Thank you, Caroline. I've got 2 questions, one on press access, the other on fentanyl and tariffs.
Sure.
On press access, your predecessor, Karine Jean-Pierre, who presided over many novel press access restrictions, criticized the recent changes to the press pool made by your office. She said in an interview, quote, "What we're looking at is what North Korea is doing." What's your response to that, and can you say anything to allay concerns that unfavorable coverage will be punished in this new press pool system?
I think that's the same individual who said from this podium numerous times that the commander-in-chief was mentally and physically up for the job, which we knew was a lie. Many people in this room knew it was a lie. Many of you were admonished for asking questions about that truth. So when it comes to truth and transparency, this administration, this White House is setting the example. This president is taking far more questions than his predecessor, Joe Biden, did on a daily basis, and that will continue.
And on fentanyl and tariffs, fentanyl produced largely in China has killed 334,000 Americans over 5 years. According to CDC data, that's about 1 in every 1,000 Americans. President Trump has cited this for applying new tariffs to Canada, Mexico, and China. But in addition to China's talk about being ready for any kind of war, they said yesterday, the foreign ministry said that, quote, "The fentanyl issue is a flimsy excuse to raise U.S. tariffs," and, quote, "The U.S., not anyone else, is responsible for the fentanyl crisis." So what's the response to China that the talk of fentanyl is just an excuse for tariffs? And what does that say about the resolution?
Well, of course, the country that is getting very rich off of distributing this deadly poison to American citizens is going to say that. Again, the president knows where the American people stand on this issue. Fentanyl overdoses. Dasha brought up all of us campaigning all across the country. They talked about inflation. They also talked about the border, the illegal immigrants that we're pouring through, but also these deadly drugs. And again, the president keeps in mind those families every single day when he is making these tough decisions. But it's a necessary decision, and he's no longer going to allow the United States of America to be a dumping ground for illegal immigrants and for illegal drugs that are killing our nation's people. This is the #1 leading cause of death in our country, and there needs to be action taken to ensure that cannot continue. Thank you very much, guys. We'll see you later.
Thanks, Caroline.
Wait, what? What was the point of that? Okay. We got our TikTok clips for the day. I don't think she answered a single question. Jesus. But okay. All right. Let me just finish these 4 more pages. Likelihood of success. The government has shown a likelihood of success on the merits of its arguments that sovereign immunity deprived the district court of jurisdiction to enter its enforcement order. Sovereign immunity bars a suit by private parties seeking to impose a liability which must be paid from public funds in the Treasury. But that is exactly what the district court ordered here. Yeah, but these are public funds these aren't just like suing the government for money. It's for enforcement of their contracts. See application, see appendix to application to vacate order 85A, 86A. The restrained defendant shall pay all invoices and letter of credit drawdown requests on all contracts for work completed prior to the entry of the court's TRO on February 13th. Sovereign immunity may be waived, but to sustain a claim that the government is liable for awards of monetary damages, the waiver of sovereign immunity must extend unambiguously to such monetary claims. But they're not. The TRO isn't about damages. It's about just paying out contracts that have already been promised. Attempting to satisfy this strict requirement, respondents point to the APA's waiver of sovereign immunity for certain actions seeking relief other than money damages. That language, as we have explained, distinguishes between specific relief, which is permitted under the APA, and compensatory or substitute relief, which is not. But the relief here more closely resembles a compensatory money judgment rather than an order for specific relief that might have been available in equity. I don't understand anything. I guess I don't understand anything about law, or everything he's saying is just bullshit. A compensatory damage is usually when you're paying somebody back for like a damage that's been inflicted on you. But this is just paying out a contract. These aren't even, I don't even know if you would consider this like damages. Like, I don't know in like a legal sense. Like if I say that my employer, let's say that my employer scammed me like $1,000 in pay and I take him to court and I win that $1,000 back. I don't know if the $1,000 that I win back, I don't think that's considered damages. That like I was paid, those are my compensatory damages. I don't believe that's the case. I'm pretty sure a damage is when a party has aggrieved you in such a way that you've now suffered that now they have to pay you money to either pay like actual damages, so actual money lost, or like a liquidated damages, which I think is when you convert other types of non-monetary harm to monetary harm. But so I don't. But that's my understanding. I could be wrong on that, though. I guess I don't think lost wages would be. I don't know if that would be considered damages ordinarily, but I could be wrong on that. An injunction to compel the payment of money past due under a contract or specific performance of a past due monetary obligation was not typically available in equity. I'm curious to read the underlying case, but I won't do that to you guys now. Sovereign immunity thus appears to bar the sort of compensatory relief that the district court ordered here. Hoping to escape that conclusion, respondents point to Bowen v. Massachusetts. In that case, we held that the APA's waiver of sovereign immunity covered a district court's judgment reversing a final order of the Secretary of Health and Human Services refusing to reimburse Massachusetts for certain Medicaid expenditures. One thing I will say, if you're a student or if you just enjoy, research or legal shit or whatever, I will say that when you're reading through shit, it is really important to read the underlying cases because these underlying cases get abused in unfathomable ways sometimes. It happened a lot in the immunity case. It happens, Finkelstein does it a lot in his books about Israel-Palestine. Like, sometimes you can read an underlying case and the takeaway from that case is the exact fucking opposite as how they're citing it in whatever bullshit justification they're using it for. But unlike the district court's order here, that judgment did not purport to order that any payment be made by the United States. Rather, Bowen simply recognized a basic reality of APA review. After a court sets aside an agency action, a natural consequence may be the release of funds to the plaintiff down the road. Indeed, we have since clarified that Bowen has no bearing on the unavailable... Okay, this is all fucking cringe. The district court ever failed to mention this before applying ahead into an order, taking into account a previous suggestion. Proper remedy for an agency's recalcitrant failure to pay out must be to seek specific sums already calculated and passed due in the Court of Federal Claims. The most that can be said is that this is the district court's denial of the government's motion for a stay pending appeal. Cited. Government has a strong argument that the district court's order violates the principle that a federal court may not issue an equitable remedy that is more burdensome to the defendant than necessary to redress the plaintiff's injuries. In this case, the district court's enforcement order functions as a universal injunction defying these foundational limits on equitable jurisdiction. Jesus. If it decided in favor of respondents, those are the people filing the case, the government would be obligated to pay all the money that is due, and respondents would have suffered only a short delay in the receipt of payments. My understanding, I think, is people have already died because of a holdup in these payments. But, okay. And if the government prevailed on its sovereign immunity argument, neither respondents nor any of the recipients of their services would have suffered any unlawful consequences. Today, the court makes a most unfortunate misstep that rewards an act of judicial hubris and imposes a $2 billion penalty on American taxpayers. That's not how taxes work. That's not how any of this works, but okay. The district court has made plain its frustration with the government, and respondents raise serious concerns about non-payment for completed work. Damn. So no concurrence written, nothing. I'm not reading like a special bullshit, am I? This is just the whole thing that it was written? Given that the deadline and the challenged order has now passed, and in light of the ongoing preliminary injunction proceedings, the district court had clarified, well, isn't this effectively just another delay? Yeah, but it's going to be delayed by like a couple days. I can't imagine the judge gives them a week or whatever. Like they've had so much time, right? We're almost, what are we, like 3 weeks out from, was it February 12th was the initial order? 1, 2, 3 weeks out from that? This guy thinks the government will get at least a little more than 48 hours to do so. Yes, the underlying TRO has now been in place for 23 days, which should have been enough time already. The court handed down the order right at 9 a.m. this morning, less than 12 hours after the end of President Trump's Tuesday night address to Congress. It is just about impossible to imagine that the ruling was still being finalized overnight, or that the Chief Justice was somehow influenced by his awkward moment with Trump. Oh, no shot, right? What if, I don't even know, bro. I don't know anything. What if this was a 5-4 granting the government's stay, canceling it, but Roberts got so fucking triggered by Trump suggesting that he owned him last night?
Very much. Appreciate it. Howard, thank you again.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. I mean, I'm sure he's just saying this like, thanks for attending, right? But
thank you again. Appreciate it. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Howard.
What if Roberts got so triggered by this? He's like, you know what? Fuck this dude. Thank you. You know what? Fuck you, actually. I am dissenting. Fuck you. What do you mean, thank you?
Won't forget. So good.
That would be fucking funny. We'll never know. That would be hilarious, though. Wait, that's Kavanaugh. Fuck, I keep mixing their faces up. You're right. No, but he says it to Roberts. This is Kavanaugh. I'm sorry. I know this is Kavanaugh. Which one of these is fucking Roberts? I always forget what this fucker looks like. He must say... Wait. Wait. You know what? Fuck you. I will continue to mix these guys up. They're similar-ish. A little bit. A little bit. Hold on. He's got a weird... This guy's just a little bit more tan, okay? Fuck you. Roberts is just out of frame. Is that who is that whose hand he's shaking right now? Is that Roberts right here?
Thank you again. Thank you again. Won't forget. So good.
Oh, there it is. Oh, okay, this guy.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Howard, thank you again. Thank you again. Won't forget. So good.
Thank you again. Won't forget.
Yeah, good.
Back in January, I wrote about how this particular 5-4 alignment with the Chief Justice and Justice Barrett joining the 3 Democratic appointees, is starting to show up in cases. On one hand, it's a bit alarming that Justice Kavanaugh joined the dissent. On the other hand, for more hoping that the court is going to be a bulwark against the mounting abuses of the Trump administration, it's a cautiously optimistic sign that there may well be at least 5 votes for that broader but yet to be proven proposition. You know what? I'll allow it. Hold on. Amy Coney Barrett almost seems like she looks a little bit like Sigourney Weaver from this angle. I'll allow it. Justice Alito's dissent goes on quite a journey in 8 pages. As is, unfortunately, often the case with respect to his dissents from emergency applications, it is fucking schizophrenic. It combines a remarkable amount of hypocrisy with statements that are either materially incorrect or, at the very least, misleading. Page 3 of the ruling, for example, Alito writes, the government must apparently pay the $2 billion post haste, not because the law requires it, but simply because a district judge has ordered. Of course, that completely misstates both the theory of the plaintiff's lawsuits and the gravamen of Judge Ali's order. The whole point is that the law does require... Okay, cool, that's good. True, yeah. It's about work already completed for which the money was already due. Alito also makes much of the argument that sovereign immunity bars the claims against the government, but the Supreme Court has already held that relief under the APA can run to whether the government is obliged to pay expenditures for which the recipients are legally entitled. Alito asserts that actually ordering the government to pay those expenditures is something else entirely. Suffice it to say, I think that's slicing the Bologna pretty thin. In that respect, contrast Alito's analysis here with his dissenting opinion in U.S. v. Texas, in which he would have upheld an injunction by a single judge-shopped district judge that effectively dictated to the executive branch what its immigration enforcement priorities must be. In explaining why the Biden administration should lose, Alito wrote, I bet this is an interesting case to read, nothing in our precedents even remotely supports this grossly inflated conception of executive power, which seriously infringes the legislative powers the Constitution grants to Congress. At issue here is Congress's authority to control immigration, and this court has repeatedly emphasized that over no conceivable subject is the legislative power of Congress more complete than it is over the admission of aliens. In the exercise of that power, Congress passed and President Clinton signed a law that commands the detention and removal of aliens who have been convicted of certain particularly dangerous crimes. The Secretary of Homeland Security, however, has instructed his agents to disobey this legislative command and instead follow a different policy that is more to his liking. In 2023, Alito dismissed the view that courts could not push back against the president in such cases as a radical theory. In 2025, apparently, it's correct. I wonder what changed. Ha! Alito is a hack fuck. Alito offers this remarkable discussion of why the harm the plaintiffs are suffering is insufficient to overcome the government's case for a stay. Any harm resulting from the failure to pay amounts that the law requires would have been diminished, if not eliminated, if the Court of Appeals had promptly decided the merits of the government's appeal, which it should not have dismissed. If we sent this case back to the Court of Appeals, it could still render a prompt decision. In other words, the plaintiffs are being harmed not by the government's refusal to pay them, but by the D.C. Circuit's refusal to exercise appellate jurisdiction over Judge Ali's pay now order. I don't even know what to say about this argument other than, if that's how irreparable harm worked, well, emergency relief and the role of intermediate appellate courts would look a heck of a lot different. Yeah, this bars the whole point of a... Okay. Anyway, all right. Cringe. But Alito is cringe, and we all know that. Okay. Just because we read it, let me throw this in here. Does this not have like a... Oh, these numbers don't get decided until like the end of the year or something, right? Or no, it would be 25-604 because it's 2025. Or have you seen the beef between HRG and Idaho's former editor? No, not yet, but we'll look at that next. File, save, download, desktop, sure. Put in here. Got him. All right, what do we got?
Kom, tempo. Ja. Oké, voorzichtig, voorzichtig.
Oh, dankjewel.
Wat is er gebeurd?
Hij reed door rood.
He ran the red light.
Wat is rood?
Ik heb een botbreuk, open wond, veel bloedverlies. Moet te snel zijn. We zijn bij je, hè? Omhoog. Ja, heel voorzichtig. Stop, hou. Huh? Wat?
Heeft hij dankjewel gezegd?
Huh?
Dat wij hier naartoe zijn gekomen. Heb jij dankjewel gezegd? Ik zei het net.
Ik heb het niet gehoord.
Ik heb het ook niet gehoord, hoor. Toen je aankwam, toen zei ik het. Ik kan het toch nog een keer zeggen nu?
Ja. Of heb je geen respect voor ons?
Ik wil naar het ziekenhuis. Ja, ik wil. Jij bent helemaal niet in de positie om iets te willen, vriend.
Ja, wat heb je trouwens voor kleren aan? Is dit iets wat jij iedere dag aantrekt? Geel hesje.
Ja, gaat dit nog lang duren? Want,
ja, sorry, duizend maar excuses. Ik begrijp dat het ontzettend moeilijk voor jou is. Maar ja, hij...
Ja, nee, nogal, want ik moet snel door. Dus,
Ja.
ja. Maar hij wil dus geen dankjewel zeggen.
Ja.
Ik heb dankjewel gezegd. Maar niet nu! Nu heb je het niet gezegd!
Ja.
Je hoeft niet te schreeuwen, hoor.
Hey!
Jezus!
Split the VOD? Wait, did August ask? Today, March 5th, a U.S. Army UH-60 Black Hawk crashed in Comayagua, Honduras. All 4 aboard survived. Updates when possible. Are these the things that have like an ungodly amount of firepower? I'm guessing this crash was like a bad something. That was the most Vegas fucking thing ever. Or like it wasn't like a full-on super crash if the helicopter mostly survived, right? They could be modified a lot. There was some Blackhawks are for moving troops, are they? Am I thinking of like an Apache helicopter? What's the one that shoots all the missiles? Some of these things look insane. This isn't what I'm even looking for. Whatever. Firepower is the Apache, right? Blackhawk is mostly transport. Gotcha. Thank you.
How do we get to success here?
Blame for that war.
I mean, look, the war started under Joe Biden's watch. He destroyed our energy policies. He empowered Russia. He was siding with Iran and China, which was also helping Russia.
Wait, but you
all
blame
of that
Joe
stuff,
Biden for the war?
This all started under Joe Biden.
But who started the war?
But my point is that that war wouldn't have started if Donald Trump's in the White House.
Why, this should be treason. Why can't you say it? Like, how hard is it to just say who started the war? Fine, you can blame it on Biden if you want, but just say it.
If we have a strong hand in the White House,
Putin wouldn't start the war. Okay, at least say that.
Vladimir Putin does not go into Ukraine. That's just the truth. We had a weak hand in the White House.
Jesus.
Joe Biden let it happen. Destroyed our energy
That's your
policy.
analysis and your view, but you don't know that for sure. And secondly,
all I know is there weren't a lot of wars getting
question,
started under President Trump.
But my
in his 4 years, what wars started under President Trump?
My point of the answer to that question.
People need more foreign policy understanding or analysis. That's such a stupid question. What wars started under Trump? I mean, like, what we were continuing a ton of military action. Iran attacked Saudi Arabia. The whole border riots happened in Israel, Palestine. We upped the drone strikes and all of the attacks going on in Yemen. We left our Kurdish allies for Turkish destruction in Syria. There was still military conflict going on in Ukraine, Russia, in the Donbass. Like, what?
Was that Putin
Somebody, please bring this up. People act like we were a world at peace under Trump, and it's just not true. That's just not true. Here's a question: who had more soldiers die in Afghanistan, Biden or Trump? The answer is Trump. Like, Biden is the one that ended the military involvement in all the drone strikes in the war against Yemen.
This war, and Russia started this war. Do you disagree with that?
Well, Putin obviously invaded Ukraine.
There you
but
go.
The reason that happened was because of weakness from the United States.
Oh, okay.
Our foreign policy matters.
Here's the next question also. This is what I want. Make these fuckers answer a question, as I never make anybody answer a question on my stream. Oh, man, dude. These last two conversations have blown my mind. Okay? But I'm not media, okay? I'm just a YouTuber. All right? Listen. Here's the question. Okay? Now, I know this is hard and it's uncomfortable because we don't like to actually use our fucking brains. Okay? You say that Russia wouldn't have invaded Ukraine under Trump? Really? What would Trump have done differently? Now, just one time in my life, I would love to hear that question. What would Trump have done differently? Would he have attacked Russia directly? What would Trump have done differently then that he can't do now? Would we not have worried about World War III then? Would we not have worried about escalating to nuclear winter then? Would we not have worried that Ukraine isn't a NATO ally? Would we not have worried that we would make Russia even more nervous? Like, what's changed? Like,
how do we get?
And if Trump was so tough that he wouldn't have invaded, why didn't he pull out of Crimea and Donetsk and Luhansk? It's almost like it's all fucking bullshit.
Monsieur le Président, Monsieur le Premier ministre, Messieurs les ministres, Mesdames et Messieurs les ministres, mes chers collègues, l'Europe est à un tournant critique de son histoire. Le bouclier américain se dérobe, l'Ukraine risque d'être abandonnée, la Russie renforcée. Washington est devenu la cour de Néron, un empereur incendiaire, des courtisans soumis et un bouffon sous kétamine chargé de l'épuration de la fonction publique. C'est un drame pour le monde libre, mais c'est d'abord un drame pour les États-Unis. Le message de Trump est que rien ne sert d'être son allié puisqu'il ne vous défendra pas, qu'il vous imposera plus de droits de douane qu'à ses ennemis et vous menacera de s'emparer de vos territoires.
What is it? Hold on. Have we Trump, tariffs, EU? I feel like I haven't heard anybody talk about this, or I hear it brought up like offhandedly. Do we know what the tariff? Okay, 25% tariffs. Like symbolically, what does it mean that the United States is going to be imposing higher tariffs on all of our friends than on what is supposed to be our worst enemy? China, right? 20% tariffs or 10% on some things. 20% tariffs, 10% on some things. Why 25% for Canada, Mexico, and the European Union? Why do we have higher tariffs on our friends than we do on what's supposed to be our existential enemy? Like, what the fuck? I feel like that's intentional. The fact that the points are higher for our friends or enemies, I feel like that's an intentional thing. It doesn't make sense. Why not just 25 on everybody?
tout en soutenant les dictatures qui vous envahissent. Le roi du deal est en train de montrer...
One thing that I wish would come up, maybe he'll say it here, maybe other European leaders have brought it up, is that like, and this is like brainwashing that's come from MAGA, and it's brainwashing that's come from young Americans, is, and young Europeans on the internet as well, people have this view that like everybody around the world viscerally hates America. But I don't think that's true. Polling data shows that that's not true. But I think that even the vast majority of the hate, at least in Europe for America, is because America is cringe. That's why people like hated America. People would be like, oh, America, that dude is really fucking cringe. But like, if you need to change your tire, or if there's like a big bully coming over to beat you up, yeah, we can call America over. He's probably just going to be really cringe after we deal with our big problem, right? He either is, going to talk about some cringe shit, or he's going to do something that looks cringe. But like, I mean, he's an okay guy. He's just like kind of cringe. I feel like that was America's reputation. I wish that more Europeans would like appeal to the America that was involved in World War I and II, or for the America that, won the Cold War. I wish that there would be more of an appeal from American leaders, from European leaders to that part of America. Trudeau kind of does it when he says, we know that not all Americans are bad, but God, we need more positive narratives or positive stories about the United States, I think.
Le deal est en train de montrer ce qu'est l'art du deal à plat ventre. Il pense qu'il va intimider la Chine en se couchant devant Poutine, mais Xi Jinping, devant un tel naufrage, est sans doute en train d'accélérer les préparatifs de l'invasion de Taïwan. Jamais dans l'histoire, un président des États-Unis n'a capitulé devant l'ennemi. Jamais aucun n'a soutenu un agresseur contre un allié. Jamais aucun n'a piétiné la Constitution américaine, pris autant de décrets illégaux, révoqué les juges qui pourraient l'en empêcher, limogé d'un coup l'état-major militaire, affaibli tous les contre-pouvoirs et pris le contrôle des réseaux sociaux.
This is not a mere illiberal drift. It is the beginning of a seizure of democracy, talking about America. Let us remember that it only took just 1 month, 3 weeks, and 2 days to bring down the Weimar Republic and its constitution. I have faith in the resilience of American democracy, and the country is already protesting. But in just 1 month, Trump has done more damage to America than in 4 years of his previous. We were at war with a dictator. We are now fighting against a dictator supported by a traitor. 8 days ago, at the very moment when Trump was patting Macron on the back at the White House, the United States voted at the UN alongside Russia and North Korea against the Europeans who were demanding the withdrawal of Russian troops. 2 days later, in the Oval Office, the draft dodger was giving moral and strategic lessons to the war hero Zelensky before dismissing him like a stable boy, ordering him to submit or resign. Last night, he took another step into disgrace by halting the delivery of promised weapons. What should we do in the face of this betrayal? The answer is simple. Stand firm. And above all, do not be mistaken. Ukraine's defeat would be Europe's defeat. The Baltic countries, Georgia, and Moldova are already on the list. Putin's goal is to return to Yalta. What is that? Is that a word for older Russian Empire stuff or something? The Yalta Conference took place in a Russian resort town. Is this when the Soviet Union was made or something? Or what? Soviet Union would enter the war against Japan and all three would exchange potential. The Soviets would grant a sphere of influence and the Yalta Conference. Okay. Oh, a region within Crimea. Okay. It's a conference in the end of World War II to divide Europe after Germany was defeated. Okay, so maybe like the blowing up of the inciting moment when the Soviet Union started to grow a bunch. Okay. Putin's goal is to return to Yalta, where half the continent was ceded to Stalin. The global south is awaiting the outcome of this conflict of the decade. Damn, this guy speaks kind of fast. Go French, people. Holy shit. The global south is awaiting the outcome of this conflict to decide whether they should continue respecting Europe or whether they are now free to trample it. What Putin wants is the end of the order established by the United States and its allies 80 years ago, whose first principle was the prohibition of acquiring territory by force. This principle is at the very foundation of the United Nations, where today the Americans voted in favor of the aggressor and against the victim, because Trump's vision aligns with Putin's. A return to spheres of influence where big powers dictate the fate of smaller nations. I take Greenland, Panama, and Canada. You take Ukraine, the Baltics, and Eastern Europe. He takes Taiwan and the South China Sea. In Mar-a-Lago, Gulf oligarchs' parties, this is called diplomatic realism. We are therefore alone. But the claim that resisting Putin is impossible is false. Contrary to Kremlin propaganda, Russia is struggling. In 3 years, the so-called second-best army in the world has managed to gain only crumbs from a country with a population 3 times smaller. With interest rates of 25%, the collapse of foreign currency and gold reserves, and a demographic crisis, Russia is on the brink. The American lifeline to Putin is the greatest strategic mistake ever made during a war. The shock is severe, but it has a virtue. Europeans are emerging from denial. In a single day in Munich, they understood that Ukraine's survival and Europe's future are in their hands, referring to the Vance speech that was just an unbelievably catastrophic, unreal, horrible speech, and that they have 3 imperatives. First, accelerate military aid to Ukraine to compensate for the American abandonment, to ensure it holds, and of course to secure it and Europe's place at the negotiating table. This will be costly. It will require ending the taboo on using frozen Russian assets. Oof. It will require bypassing Moscow's accomplices within Europe itself. I don't know who a French senator speaks. I don't know how powerful this senator is, or if he... Wait! A little bit? Walter. We need to defend Ukraine. I think I get this. Come on. I actually think this one's pretty close. For real, though. For realsies. I think it's pretty close. Apparently Europe has, is it like $300 billion in Russian funds that are frozen, but they're not using them because obviously Russia wants that money back. The real implications, the crazy thing is that if, the thing is that like this would be the dissolution of probably the United Nations, I think, right? Because now the European Union would basically be moving against 2 members who are 2 of, is it 5 permanent members on the UN Security Council, who obviously would be opposed to this. I don't know if the UN Security Council would even have any say over the utilization of these funds, but the 5 permanent members are China, France, Russia, the UK, and the United States. Yeah, Russia having those funds basically used now, stolen and used, expropriated for Ukraine would be wild, but it should absolutely happen. Well, I say that, but I don't know all the political ramifications of that. I feel like it should happen, though. On the little I know, but... It will require bypassing Moscow's accomplices within Europe itself, through a coalition of willing countries, with the United Kingdom, of course, included. Second, demand that any agreement includes the return of kidnapped children, prisoners, and absolute security guarantees. After Budapest, Georgia, and Minsk, we know what Putin's agreements are worth. Why, dude, where are our leaders? Why do you guys, like, why does, like, he's giving a speech narrativizing the role of the countries in the world. He's making so many historical references to how we all used to act. He's referring specifically to things that need to be done to ensure European and Ukrainian security, giving like This is what we need to do. He's referencing actual agreements and countries that the Budapest Memorandum was 94. The two Minsk agreements over the invasion were both violated, obviously. People argue on both sides, but I mean, Russia's the invader. The Budapest Memorandum was that nuclear weapons thing, the 94, and then Georgia was a country that was invaded and cut up, just like they're doing to Ukraine. Like, why don't we have American leaders that do this? Why don't we have anybody in America that knows anything? Our leaders, our political leaders, they should know this. We know what Putin's agreements are worth. These guarantees must be backed by sufficient military force. Also, this right here, this is what America should be saying. This is America's role that these guys are fulfilling right now. This is what America should be doing, because we have all the necessary tools and history to do this. To prevent another invasion. Finally, and most urgently, because it will take the longest, we must rebuild the neglected European defense, which has relied on the American umbrella since 1945 and sabotaged since the fall of the Berlin Wall. It is a Herculean task, but it is on its success or failure that the leaders of today's democratic Europe will be judged in the history books. Friedrich Merz has just declared that Europe needs its own military alliance. This is an admission that France has been right for decades in advocating for strategic autonomy. Now it must be built. Massive investment will be needed. Reinforcing the European Defense Fund outside the Maastricht debt criteria, harmonizing weapons and ammunition systems, accelerating Ukraine's EU membership, since it now has the largest army in Europe, rethinking the role and conditions of nuclear deterrence based on French and British capabilities, which I believe are the only two EU nations, European nations, I have to say, my bad, that I believe possess nuclear weapons. I think it's just France and Britain. And relaunching missile and defense and satellite programs. The plan announced yesterday by Ursula von der Leyen is an excellent starting point, and much more will be needed. Europe will only become a military power again by becoming an industrial power once more. In short, we must implement the Draghi report for real. I don't know if that is referencing something for European army, but Europe's true rearmament is in its moral rearmament. Destiny. The UK nukes are relying on the US, though, since they use Trident. French nukes are entirely homemade in its systems. That's why he's talking about harmonization. So I'm a little bit out of my comfort zone here, warning, but this is my understanding, okay? One thing that we kind of like take for granted when it comes to working with military stuff is I think there's like an ecosystem, and ecosystems matter, right? Imagine if you go to plug into a person's computer and they're like, oh shit, you have a USB keyboard, I need a PS2 port. Or, oh shit, you're trying to connect your printer with whatever cable, I only do a serial port. Like, oh fuck, you need adapters, shit's not guaranteed to work. It's fucked. You have to be working with like similar standards, with similar measurements, with similar tolerances, capabilities, right? The nice thing about NATO and the United States leading that is that the US, when he said harmonization, like there's like the same diameter ammunitions, there's the same diameter munitions, there's like munitions ammunitions, there's like similar procedures, similar repair things, similar parts, like everything is harmonized. That's what that harmonization means. But unfortunately, a lot of these are probably US dictated standards. Europe would have to move to their own standards to try to create some harmonized thing that would allow these countries to all cooperate with each other in a military manner that would be effective, and it wouldn't be a massive clusterfuck headache or whatever, you know. But Europe's true rearmament is its moral rearmament. We must convince public opinion in the face of war, fatigue, and fear, and especially against Putin's collaborators, both the far right and the far left. They once again stood in the National Assembly yesterday, Prime Minister before you, arguing against European unity and European defense. They claim to want peace. What neither they nor Trump say is that their peace is capitulation, the peace of defeat, the replacement of de Gaulle's Zelensky with Ukrainian Putin at Putin's beck and call. Ukrainian Putin? I'm going to take a guess. Is that, oh no. Who's the leader of Belarus? What is that a reference to? Putin was the big guy who surrendered to the Nazis. Oh, gotcha. Okay. Former president of the Council of Ministers of France. Head of the collaborative regime of Vichy France. The leader of occupied France in World War II. Gotcha. Okay. at Putin's beck and call. The peace of collaborators who, for 3 years, have refused to support the Ukrainians in any way. Is this the end of the Atlantic Alliance? The risk is great, but in recent days, the public humiliation of Zelensky and the series of reckless decisions taken over the past month have finally stirred Americans into action. Poll numbers are plummeting. Republican representatives are being met with hostile crowds in their districts. Even Fox News is becoming critical. The Trumpists are no longer in their prime. They control the executive branch, Congress, the Supreme Court, and social networks. But in American history, the defenders of freedom have always prevailed. They are beginning to rise again. The fate of Ukraine is decided in the trenches, but it also depends on those in the United States who fight for democracy. And here, on our ability to unite Europeans, to find the means for our collective defense, and to restore Europe as the great power it once was, and hesitates to become again. I'll let him have it. Our parents defeated fascism and communism at the cost of great sacrifice. The task of our generation is to defeat the totalitarianisms of the 21st century. Long live free Ukraine, long live democratic Europe. Jeez. Why can't we get parts of this broadcast in some American media channels?